Let me introduce you to Haru. This guy is the kind of person who makes being a loser look like an art form. Even before getting thrown into another world, he was already a failure in his own. No friends, no romantic prospects, and a future so bleak it made a black hole look optimistic. He never fit in with any of the cliques in class. Not the hardcore bullies, not the attention-seeking girls, not the Sam Sulek followers, not the sweaty nerds, and definitely not the holier-than-thou types with a few screws loose. He just put his head down on the desk again, knowing there was no place for a weirdo like him in this world. Then suddenly, everyone in the classroom started acting like complete idiots, staring at a golden glowing circle that appeared in the room. Haru, being the nerd that he is, had read enough manga to know they were about to get transported to another world. But that sounded like too much work, so he decided to nope out and literally tried to leave. Unfortunately, the door was sealed shut with what might as well have been industrial-grade superglue. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break it open. The magic circle spread across the entire room, and one by one, his classmates started getting sucked in. But Haru had watched way too many Mission Impossible movies, so he jumped into the ventilation duct to escape. Luck wasn't on his side, though. The circle followed him into the duct and sucked him into an endless white void. He looked around, expecting an ugly king with a ridiculously attractive daughter to greet him. Nothing. Then he spotted an old man running toward him, trying to communicate in sign language for some reason. Haru somehow managed to understand the old guy when he realized all his classmates had been summoned before him and sent to different worlds. After they picked their special skills, the old man told him to follow so he could pick one too. But out of 50 skills, 43 were already taken. No overpowered abilities left. He realized he'd have to pick something garbage and somehow survive in a new world. His hopes and dreams shattered when he noticed even a jellyfish had better skills than what was left for him. He started shaking the old man like a maraca, screaming at him to restock better skills or learn to count properly and not summon more people if there weren't enough skills. The old man lost his patience, shoved him, and said someone with a bowling ball head like him wouldn't survive even with the best skills. Then he just gave him all the remaining skills and pushed him into the new world. Haru couldn't believe what he saw when he turned around. A massive forest surrounded him, and he was completely alone. He spotted a bag on the ground and picked it up, discovering it had unlimited carrying capacity. Actually, a pretty decent item. Everything inside was as basic as it gets, though. He checked his stats, and 2 dice appeared on the screen. He rolled them, and both landed on M. Sure, he had no idea what that meant, but the stats told him to put everything into a single skill. Figuring M probably meant minus or something, he decided to play it safe and put everything into luck. To his complete surprise, M actually meant maximum. Now his luck stat was maxed out. He also discovered that because he was such a lonely incel, God gave him a pity ability that let him tame wild beasts. He looked around for any of his classmates, but there was nobody in sight. So he decided to move forward and build his own shelter, taking inspiration from those 2 YouTube guys who build mud houses. While walking through the forest, he got a strange feeling that some giant monster was about to jump out at him. He pulled out another skill item, contact lenses. The moment he put them on, he gained the ability to see the stats of different things. Pretty important and useful ability. He realized these skills might be way more than their names implied and kept moving happily while scanning the area for herbs that could boost his health, anti-venom mushrooms, and more. With his bottomless bag, he could collect as much as he wanted and sell them as medicine for huge profit. After hydrating like a true Sigma male, he continued through the forest and found a cave opening. He prayed to God there were no monsters inside, then entered to find something useful. The cave got dark fast, so he pulled out his lantern and magical tent that he could easily set up and live in. When night fell, Haru got more comfortable than Bear Grylls. He gathered sticks and used his temperature magic to light them up, which would also keep beasts away. He checked his stats again, only to find several skills had leveled up, but he was too tired to check them, so he crashed. The next morning, he woke with a start and checked the area to make sure he was still safe. His monster-repelling techniques must have worked perfectly. He was getting hungry, so he lit another fire, grabbed his frying pan, and seared some mushrooms and dried meat like a true cooking YouTuber. The food turned out really good, and he wondered if he could live a life here as a buff farmer, but realized he didn't have the protein. He left the cave again and found a bunch of herbs that could help him gain some muscle. While collecting them, he heard a commotion behind him and found a group of stupid goblins picking stuff off the ground. He immediately got scared, coward that he is, and hid behind some bushes while the brainless goblins started singing Skibidi Toilet. That was where Haru drew the line. He grabbed his stick before he got affected by that brainwashing. He wondered if his stick would be enough to handle 2 goblins. But to be safe, he put up some protection and charged at them, smacking one goblin right in its big, fat head. Something awakened in him as he started beating the poor beast like a piñata until it was knocked out on the ground. The other goblin got scared, but attacked him anyway. Luckily for Haru, the goblin's attacks were easy to predict. He dodged easily, hit it in the head, and fired off a small magical explosion that finished the job. He washed his face as the sun started setting and decided to head back since he'd worked hard enough today. Back at his cave, he roasted mushrooms like a total hobo and checked his stats, only to find multiple skills had leveled up. Great news, but he also wondered what the goblins would do to him if they found him alone in an empty cave. He quickly pushed those terrifying thoughts aside, warmed up with some exercises, and went back to bed. The next morning, he woke up to more mushrooms for breakfast, which was getting old. He wondered if he could find some meat, but immediately remembered how the vegans in his class would eat him alive if he said that. He quickly got up, boosted his stats with some magic, and headed out for the day with his trusty stick in hand. He found an item on the ground that turned out to be another stupid mushroom. He tossed it away and started looking for meat that grows on trees like a complete moron. Eventually, he snapped out of it and decided to just work on his magical skills and boost his stats again. He started running through the forest, and to his surprise, his speed had increased several times over. His body felt light and fast. Even his attacks seemed quicker and stronger, so he decided to test them on a nearby group of goblins. He jumped into battle, smacked the first goblin in the face with his stick, then hit the second one in the head too. This seemed to enrage the goblins, though. The buff one grabbed a club, but Haru hid behind some bushes like a complete coward and ran while the goblins searched for him. He figured he'd had enough for one day and went back to his cave, where he thought about what he'd done and started working on some DIY projects, like assembling an IKEA table after multiple attempts. The next morning, he was pretty good at it and managed to build a stool and a coffee table by himself. He decided to reinforce his security now that he knew how to build things. He made a wooden gate at the cave entrance to make sure nobody could enter without permission. That night, he went out to hunt some small game because he couldn't live without meat anymore. Luck was on his side. He spotted a rabbit running through the forest. His animalistic desire for meat took over completely, and he caught it like a wild cat. He started grinning like a monster at the thought of delicious meat when he suddenly sensed other people nearby and went into alert mode. He looked around and, to his dismay, found the group of bullies walking toward him. He got scared. He didn't want to deal with them. So he hid behind some bushes and started moving away quietly, but his idiot senses started tingling again. He quickly used his special vision skills, which let him see everything around him. To his surprise, he spotted the class's attention-seeking girls coming from one side, while the Sam Sulek fans and the weird nerds came from the other. He decided he didn't want anything to do with them when he suddenly spotted the vegan girls led by the class president. He let go of the rabbit and wondered if he should approach the class president since she'd always been nice to him, and he'd known her since elementary school. But he stopped himself with pure willpower, thinking about how great it was to be his own boss, and decided he would conquer this world alone. While celebrating his incel status, he got carried away and made a noise that immediately attracted the bully's attention. Afraid of getting discovered and beaten up, he jumped back into the bushes, hiding from the bully. The arrogant idiot sensed something was off, though, and immediately went to check the bushes. Luckily, a rabbit saved Haru, and the bullies got bored and left. He decided to follow them toward a riverbank, where everyone sat down and started chatting about the usual stuff guys talk about. Haru was disgusted by their fatherless behavior, and realized the class president was too sensible to fall for guys like this. Suddenly, he noticed the bullies had grabbed one of the nerds named Tanaka and were using him as Google to get all the answers about their skills. They soon headed upstream to find the rest of the classmates, but Haru wasn't interested. He went back to his cave and started cooking mushrooms while checking his stats. He noticed his loner skill had leveled up because he decided to stay away from his classmates, but even after that, he was still at level 3. Probably because of his skill called Master of None, basically ADHD, since he couldn't focus on leveling up a single skill. The other skill called Hollow Head was a complete mystery to him, since it just sounded like an insult. He decided to stress eat his anxieties away like a teenage girl during exam week and went back to sleep. Later that night, he couldn't sleep because someone was making too much noise outside. He went out expecting to find the bullies, but instead found the nerds in a full-on battle against the goblins. They seemed about as skilled in martial arts as Joe Biden, which made Haru laugh as he wondered if he should help these idiots. That changed when he checked their stats. They had incredible overpowered abilities compared to his leftover skills and were at much higher levels. He remembered that his class was full of top-tier students, whether athletes, smart nerds, or celebrity kids, making him the only average guy in the room. He decided to go back to sleep since the nerds could handle themselves when he suddenly sensed a presence that put him on alert. He turned and saw two goblins sneaking up behind the nerds, ready to shove their clubs up their backsides, but Haru felt bad for them and decided to lend a hand. He jumped in and smacked both goblins with a single swing of his thick stick, taking them down. The nerds turned around, surprised to see Haru there, and thanked him for the help while he led them back to his cave. They were shocked to see such an amazing cave, completely spotless and full of useful items, with not a single anime body pillow in sight. They asked how he managed to build all this. Haru explained that he knew earth magic and some other low-level magic skills that helped him set everything up. He asked the nerds what happened to the rest of the classmates, and that seemed to silence everyone. The glasses-wearing nerd looked down before telling Haru that they were on the run now. Haru was surprised and asked what he meant. He explained that on the day they were transported to this world, everyone was in shock, unable to believe what was happening. But the nerds quickly figured out they were in an alternate world and had overpowered skills. The spoiled girls were crying, the attention seekers were bored, but the class president was trying to calm everyone down. The bullies noticed the nerds weren't as scared by the sudden change and threatened to beat them if they didn't share everything they knew about this world. But before they could do anything, they were surrounded by goblins. The attention seekers started crying, and even the bullies started acting like a bunch of cowards huddling in a corner. But this was the moment every nerd in the world waits for, and the nerds took control. They immediately claimed their skills and used their knowledge of fantasy worlds to easily defeat the goblins. The Sam Sulek fans decided to help, and together they took down all the goblins in the area. The class president quickly took charge again and led them to a clear area near the riverbank where they could actually see any danger approaching. Soon after, the nerds helped everyone understand the basics, and they set up camp while the class president divided the work among them. Everything would have gone smoothly if the whole class worked as a single unit, but in reality, the attention seekers were the first to decide they didn't want to set up tents and work, so they left on their own. Realizing leaving was an option, the bullies decided to abandon them too, while the class president tried to stop everyone but failed miserably. Slowly, the whole class split into their own groups, each going their separate ways. This left the class president with the nerds and a handful of other students who tried working together as a team. But since everyone else was so incompetent, the nerds were forced to do most of the work, including fighting goblins and making sure the camp wasn't overrun. They also wanted to level up as fast as possible to protect themselves from the two most dangerous skills that could control everyone. Unfortunately, both skills were taken by the bullies, who couldn't be trusted. The only way to escape that spell was to have high magic resistance. The bullies quickly learned about this too. To counter what the nerds were doing, these useless oxygen thieves also started leveling up to make sure their skills reigned supreme so they could take control of everyone. The nerds told this plan to the class president, who decided to train and level up too. Finally, after a few days, the bullies managed to learn the mind control skills. To their surprise, they conveniently found the class president walking nearby. These degenerate losers immediately tried using their spell on her, but she had other plans and shocked them hard, forcing them to the ground. The nerds helped drag them back to camp, where their plans were revealed, and the bullies got kicked out of the group. Unfortunately, this wasn't the happy ending they hoped for. These clueless losers decided to attack their own classmates, burning down the camps and chasing the nerds to teach them a lesson. The whole camp was destroyed because nobody dared to go against the bullies with their mind control abilities. This really crushed the nerds, who had worked so hard on the camp. Worse, the attention seekers showed their true colors, blaming the nerds for everything, saying they shouldn't have picked a fight with the bullies if they couldn't handle it. Slowly, the whole class turned against them, and only the class president defended them. But since the situation was too awkward, they decided to leave. Haru was impressed after hearing all this and hugged them tight, saying they were true heroes. He decided to throw them a party where they got drunk on mushrooms like Mike Tyson on a podcast. The next morning, Haru said goodbye to them with a bag full of mushrooms. The nerds asked if he wanted to join their team since he fit in better with them, saying they were heading to a nearby city to become adventurers. Haru told them to screw off. He was a loner and literally shooed them away like dogs. Haru decided to check on his other classmates, especially the class president, but on the way, he ran into an angry wolf. The monster wolf bit him hard on the arm, but Haru managed to smack it on the head, knocking it out before moving on. When night fell, he found the area where his classmates had camped before, but all that was left was the remains of a camp. He quickly used his tracking skills and started following footprints when he suddenly sensed the attention seekers coming straight at him. He tried to hide and get away. Unfortunately, they spotted him and screamed for him to stop, but he ran like crazy, knowing he shouldn't stick his stick in crazy. But they forced him to stop and asked if he knew where the nerds were. He asked if they wanted the nerds to do favors for them, but they told him to shut up, saying they realized their mistake and that they were only alive because of the nerds. He told them to forget it. The nerds were long gone, and they could only chase after him if they knew how to satisfy all the monsters on the way. He tried to make sure they wouldn't chase the nerds and die senselessly, but to his surprise, the attention seekers started crying out of nowhere. They screamed that they just wanted to apologize. The ringleader begged Haru to teach them how to survive until they found the nerds, promising him the super ultra deluxe treatment if he taught them. Haru agreed. The girls followed him like lost puppies in the forest, attacking everything he killed. He noticed one of them was injured and gave her some potion, but the idiot didn't realize it wasn't champagne and threw it all over Haru. He was so fed up with these clueless idiots that he started thinking about going back to the cave to relax when the class president spotted him spacing out. She seemed happy to see him and called out, but Haru was too busy with his plans to look at her until she screamed for his attention. Haru was shocked to see the class president right beside him and thought maybe he'd finally have a chance to get someone before the delinquents attacked again. The class president, however, didn't like seeing him with girls so late and asked, "Why the hell are these Instagram influencers following you?" Haru tried to dodge the questions, but the other girls with the class president started giving him death glares while she told him to stay put and asked the girls what he'd been doing. Haru didn't even want help from these girls anyway. He just wanted to go back to his incel life alone, but he was forced to sit while the others discussed what to do about the situation. Haru decided to practice magic in the meantime and started casting some earth magic spells that went wrong, leaving him stuck underground. The class president got worried, but since she had a strong pull game, she easily freed him from the ground. She concluded Haru was harmless, that he just wanted to help the girls in exchange for some favors that could be written off as business expenses. She and her group apologized for talking bad about him, but Haru just wanted to go home and play with his wood. The moment he mentioned a house, the girls got interested, asking if he was born there. Haru realized these girls had the collective charm of a toaster and said he came into this world like them, but had free time and built himself a house. These opportunists immediately started another group meeting when the class president asked how big his house was. Haru thought for a moment and replied it could easily fit 240 people, and if he removed some furniture and bathrooms, maybe more. The girls were shocked about the bathroom, while the class president yelled at him for living in such luxury, while the rest of them lived like Bear Grylls. Finally, the class president worked up the courage to ask if they could spend a night at his house. This short-circuited his brain as he started imagining the girls in silk pajamas, while the class president screamed at him to stop having scandalous thoughts. Soon they started walking through the forest, and somehow this guy had Google Maps, following arrows at night while the other idiots could barely see what was in front of them. After what felt like forever, they reached his house, all out of breath, while he welcomed them to his humble abode. They immediately started drooling over all the luxurious things he had. Haru wondered if he'd done a speed run on building heaven. Things took an incredible turn when the girls finally saw the bathroom. Their clothes came off faster than mine in my bedroom. They jumped in the bath together while Haru stood outside, wondering if living in the forest had turned their femininity into savagery. Haru finally decided to call it a night, feeling very happy to have his own space outside, but even that was interrupted by the class president coming into his tent and starting to ramble about how the other guys left them alone in the forest and how hard it was for strong, independent women to survive without their stained cups and iced pumpkin spice lattes. But Haru's house gave them much-needed relief. Haru told her she'd done a great job keeping their spirits up and protecting them on the journey and shouldn't compare herself to those idiots who spent their whole lives hoping to get transported to an alternate world. The class president thanked him for his kind words and went back home, where everyone slept well while Haru grabbed some weed and started imagining the girls practicing how to make a protein shake. The next morning, he woke up hoping no one would turn on a black light in the tent when he saw a purple-haired girl inside. He wondered if this was the part where he finds an Alabama stepsister, but she was just a classmate. She told him to get ready for breakfast since they'd cooked mushrooms and fish, which shocked him so much he banged his head into hers. He ran outside and started devouring the fish like a starving piranha, while the class president asked why he was acting like he'd never seen fish before. Haru told her to shut up. He went to the river every day and watched fish while eating his stupid mushrooms. The class president asked why he didn't catch them, but Haru said fish were slippery than soap, making them really hard to catch. He asked how they managed to catch these fish, and the class president replied they had experience with slippery things and also had magic. One of the girls showed how she used lightning magic to Pikachu the fish, which excited Haru as he asked her to show him again. The girl produced the lightning ball again, but this time he approached and covered it in a plastic cube before throwing it into the water, killing all the fish. This excited him so much he even learned lightning magic that way. The girls were confused, but he explained that with his packaging magic he could learn elemental magic. The class president realized that sounded like a completely broken skill, but Haru said the crappy old man who called himself God gave him terrible skills, and this was just a loophole he found. Later, while the girls were playing in the water, he asked the class president about their plans. She replied they planned to go to a nearby city and find work there. Haru thought for a moment and said right now they weren't very strong or independent and would need to level up more. The girls got angry since they were wearing short clothes, which obviously meant they were empowered, but Haru knew they were just idiots. The class president asked if he could help them level up, and Haru immediately agreed, starting basic training. But when he asked their levels, he found out the lowest was 16, which was insane because he was still level 7. He wondered what he could teach them since they were so much stronger than him. Suddenly, the bushes behind them rustled. Haru drew attention and revealed a pack of wolves hiding, waiting for a chance to bite their succulent flesh. As a test, he asked them to fight. The girls seemed super confident like any empowered woman of this generation, but in the end, they were completely useless and got beaten badly in a terrible way. After that shameful performance, they all went into Haru's tent and started contemplating future plans since they had no skills. So all they could do was go back to the kitchen or find a sugar daddy. The girls in the class quickly decided they'd find a rich man easily, and the others followed suit, feeling empowered again. Meanwhile, the pink-haired girl from the morning apologized for entering his tent without permission, saying she just wanted to make sure he was a harmless incel and not like those delinquents. He told her not to worry and slept in the tent, only to wake up to another delicious fish breakfast. While eating, he heard some girls going back into the forest to try to defeat the wolves with their feminine charms, apparently. But luckily, the class president stopped them and said they needed to practice, so training began. They fought low-level goblins, but these pathetic losers were so trash that even the garbage truck didn't want them. They lost one by one. But after more training, the day of the rematch finally arrived. The wolves seemed confident and even started taunting. He wondered if this would motivate the girls to fight, but some of these idiots were sleeping while others made excuses to run from the fight. Luckily, not all of them were useless. The pink-haired girl took the initiative, and soon a few others followed. Even though their execution was flawed, they managed to defeat the poor wolves easily and celebrated after, even inviting one of the wolves to their room for a rave tonight. Haru lay down thinking his work with these stupid attention-seekers was done, but the class president soon arrived and asked when they were leaving for the nearby city. This caught him off guard since he never planned to go anywhere, but these crazy girls forced him to come with them to the city. The next morning, he was forced to pack his things with the pink-haired girl, while the class president gave a motivational speech. She soon turned her attention to Haru and noticed he was literally trying to shove everything he could into a tiny backpack. She said they couldn't carry that much stuff alone. Finally, after some back and forth, Haru decided to leave most things behind and told the pink-haired girl to stay there and watch it. The class president was shocked and said they wouldn't leave her behind. After one last check to make sure he had all the necessary items, they decided to set out for adventure. Haru looked at the horizon, thinking about the problems they'd face on the journey, and told the class president they'd have to stick together no matter what if they wanted to get out of this forest alive. Unbeknownst to them that night, as rain started falling, one of their classmates who'd been left alone ran through the dark forest, tripping over roots and rocks, fleeing from an attacker. His marathon ended quickly when he finally fell to the ground and turned to face his hooded attacker, begging for his life, saying he didn't have the skills he was looking for. But the cruel attacker didn't seem to care and started choking the poor boy without even asking for consent or establishing a safe word. As expected, the boy quickly met his end while the attacker moved through the forest again, looking for his next victim. The next morning, they continued their journey through the forest, and Haru realized he needed to stay with the girls constantly to make sure they were safe from the delinquents hunting them. They decided to try to get out of the forest as fast as possible since they didn't feel safe there. While walking through an open area, they suddenly came face to face with a giant ogre wielding a club. Haru told the girls to hide behind the trees since he didn't want them getting hurt, and had them watch him closely so they could learn a thing or two about jungle survival. He prepared to face the ogre and started comparing their sizes, but new size wasn't everything, so he used the ogre's slow movements to his advantage and disappeared from the area, leaving the ogre confused. He chuckled, hiding behind trees while remembering that ogres have high physical resistance, so hitting one with a stick would be stupid. Instead, he needed some kind of magical attack that could do much more damage. He quickly opened his status and started looking for magical skills he could use, but realized he only had basic elemental magic that he used for cleaning, vacuuming, and dusting the floor. Before he could make a decision, though, the ogre managed to find him and smashed the tree in two. The angry fatty started swinging his club, reminding him of his toxic ex. But unlike him, Haru was good at dodging crazy women, so he kept retreating while trying to find a way out of this problem. Finally, he took advantage of the ogre's pea-sized brain and with some stylish moves appeared behind the fat idiot, giving him a good whack on the head with his stick, proving that endurance beats size. The ogre slowly fell unconscious, while the size queens watched from behind the trees, shocked to see the fatty on the ground. Haru himself was shocked since he never expected to defeat it so easily, especially since the nerd said it was resistant to physical damage. The girls seemed annoyed since they didn't learn anything, since he didn't even use magic. He apologized and promised that the next fat idiot they found would be killed with magic only. It didn't take long to find their next opponent, as a stupid ogre was minding his own business, walking toward his skibidi toilet. Haru decided to dazzle the girls with his unlimited aura, creating a small fireball in his hands. He expected the magic wouldn't be very effective since it was his first time using it, but when he yelled Kobe and threw the ball, it exploded right in the monster's face, killing the beast with a single headshot. The girls were shocked again since there was no way to learn anything from that display of power. Regardless, they had a successful day, so when night fell, they made a fire and started doing their natural thing, setting up a kitchen and cooking. Meanwhile, Haru was busy setting up traps around the camp and making sure the tents were protected from monsters and any other enemies. Suddenly, he detected someone coming and sprang into action, hiding behind a tree. He realized the intruders were human and hoped they were the delinquents, but they turned out to be the bodybuilder guys looking for creatine in the jungle. Haru was relieved to see them compared to the delinquents. They were way cooler. They seemed surprised to see Haru in the jungle and said they were looking for the girls, wanting to warn everyone about a dangerous new skill they'd just discovered. Haru immediately got interested while the buff bodybuilder told him about a secret skill called hijack, which was even deadlier than the delinquents' mind control abilities. They said they couldn't trust anyone now, so Haru decided to pull a prank on them and pretended to have the hijack skill. The bodybuilders just laughed, saying even if he had it, it wouldn't matter since he'd be locked inside a house. Haru got offended and claimed he actually had a skill called bondage, but the bodybuilders said it was 2024 and they weren't into that slavery stuff even in the South. After that, they said goodbye to Haru, telling him to keep an eye out for the person with the hijack skill as they disappeared into the forest looking for a protein shake. The next morning, the girls prepared for weapons training, but while they were busy putting on makeup, Haru decided to go into the forest for his business, but the class president ended up following him. She stopped him and asked where he was last night. Haru honestly answered that he ran into the bodybuilders who warned him about the hijack skill. The class president immediately turned a little pale, started fidgeting, then lowered her head and apologized for hiding something important. Haru wasn't stupid, though. He'd already guessed she probably had the hijack skill. The class president was shocked to see him so calm and asked how he figured it out. Haru replied he wasn't as dumb as those creatine-crazed idiots and deduced it from her behavior. The class president still seemed confused, since hijack was a pretty scary skill that gave her the power to steal skills from anyone after killing them. Haru told her not to worry too much about it since the nerds knew what they were doing, trying to seal the delinquents' mind control abilities. Even knowing about her hijack skill, they didn't bother to change anything, which simply meant they trusted her. Haru felt the same, saying he was relieved she had that broken ability since he knew she wouldn't use it to hurt anyone. The class president felt relieved after hearing this and started smiling at Haru, which really got him excited. He decided to run into the forest to relieve himself before starting the day. When he returned to camp, he started selling nutshakes with optional cocoa for some reason and asked for money. One of the girls immediately agreed to sell her body instead. Haru obviously accepted the deal, but the class president immediately shut it down, saying she wouldn't let anyone be pimped out. The girl was pretty upset, though, since she really wanted that nutshake. So Haru decided they better start moving to get their brains working again. They started making good progress when Haru suddenly spotted the river ahead and told the class president he'd go ahead to scout while she made sure the group was safe. The class president wanted to stop him since he'd also gone into the forest that morning and come back with a suspicious coconut shake. Haru didn't listen and used his super speed to launch into the forest, then started using his magic infusion ability to lighten his body. This gave him the ability to be more agile as he jumped through the trees before launching into the sky for a better view. He quickly realized they'd covered a lot of ground, but this idiot forgot he didn't have landing gear. He tried floating in the sky cartoonishly, but obviously failed and crashed into the ground, barely surviving with his HP. When he returned to camp, it was already nightfall, and the class president was pissed to see him all banged up. He calmly said he fell from a tree while she screamed at him to stop hitting his head again and again since he already had few brain cells left. Usually Haru didn't have to deal with attention seekers and their opinions, so he tried calming her down with a suspicious nut shake, optional cocoa, you know. But the class president refused and walked away, while the thinker girl immediately ran up to him asking for cash. Thanks to his scouting, though, they found a much faster route through the forest the next morning. After some crying and water sports, they ended up running into a group of ogres. The girls proved to be experts at running away, trampling poor Haru under their shoes to escape quickly. Finally, after solving all the problems and traveling through the forest for several days, they managed to get out of the woods and spot the beautiful city ahead. Haru suddenly realized he seemed to have unlocked a new skill, Skywalk. He decided to test it, and to his surprise, with this skill, he could easily walk in the air like climbing stairs. The class president was shocked to see that, but Haru told her to calm down while he checked the area to make sure there was no danger nearby. He went high into the sky and used his supervision to look far and wide when he suddenly found some armed and armored NPCs fighting a bunch of monsters. He went back down and told the class president, who immediately said they needed to help those guys. Haru wasn't interested in having competition for the girls, so he refused, claiming those guys could very well be bandits. But the class president begged him to help, saying if they weren't bandits, they could die a painful death. Haru realized these girls were kind of crazy, so he told them to relax while he went alone to check out the situation. The problem was the NPCs were pretty far away. He decided to use his ingenuity, combining different spells with magic infusion, making his body very light, then using wind magic for propulsion. Along with these spells, he started using Skywalk and jumped from step to step with incredible speed. His gamble paid off, and he realized he could now travel to distant places with great ease. Unfortunately, the class president, the hollow head, ended up being pulled along by his magic, struggling to hold on to his cloak. But due to the extra weight and not knowing how to brake, Haru ended up parachuting right next to the NPCs. Thanks to his triumphant entrance, the monsters ended up dead while the class president was unconscious. The NPCs asked who the hell these crazy idiots were. They introduced themselves as Gart and Oft, saying they were on a mission to kill these monsters but were clearly at a disadvantage and would have died if not for Haru. The girls in his group healed up quickly while everyone started fixing their wagons. Haru offered some grilled mushrooms. Gart happily took them, but with one bite, he realized these weren't ordinary mushrooms. They were buff mushrooms that helped recover strength instantly. Haru handed out mushrooms to the remaining group members, who regained their energy instantly, wondering why this stranger would offer them such valuable food resources. Haru's mind, however, was stuck on the fact that these old guys were surrounded by breathtakingly beautiful women, which annoyed him and made him ready to punch them. But luckily the class president woke up and stopped him. Soon after, the other girls also arrived at the scene and were immediately enchanted by the beautiful elves, asking about their beauty routines. Having helped them survive, the NPCs decided to escort them back to the city, which was a huge achievement. The girls entered the city happily, looking forward to their next adventure. Haru felt pretty happy seeing the girls enchanted with the new city, running through the main square, checking out every little shop, while he wondered if he should leave since his work there was done. While Haru relaxed with his Jack Daniels, they seemed to be going crazy, looking at all the buildings that looked like cupcakes, making their mouths water. Luckily, the class president was there to keep everyone in line, screaming for Haru to help her control this bunch of clumsy idiots since she couldn't do everything alone. She blew her whistle, which immediately brought all the girls to her like a pack of trained dogs, surprising Haru since he never expected the class president to have that much power. Seeing this, he felt more at ease, thinking the girls were in good hands, but the class president wasn't going to let him escape that easily. She started formulating the day's plan, saying first they'd take their butts to the Adventurers Guild, where they'd trade all the loot they'd collected so far. With the money they got, they'd register at the guild, and after that, have a good night's sleep in a comfortable bed. Everyone seemed on board so far. Then the class president mentioned that after a few days, they'd also start looking for information about the nerds from their class. This made the Thinker girls pretty angry since they wanted to find the nerds as soon as possible to apologize for making fun of him for no reason. The class president apologized, saying she obviously wanted to find the nerds too, while Haru jumped in and asked if the Thinker girls wanted to give the nerds a special treat. Soon after, they finally reached the Adventurers Guild, but it was way scarier than they ever imagined. They expected a place full of girls with great stats and welcoming happy faces, but instead were greeted by a bunch of guys staring hungrily at them, wondering who the hell these newbies were. Luckily, Oft appeared from the stairs and called Haru, saying the guildmaster wanted to see them, so Haru told the class president to wait outside while he went into the guild alone. As soon as he entered, all the adventurers started staring at him while Gart directed him inside, where he found a stern-looking guildmaster who asked if he was the Haru who fought the wild beasts. Haru got scared and wondered if he should just run away, but decided to face the situation and nodded in agreement. Suddenly, the whole atmosphere changed, and the guildmaster started shaking his hand, thanking him for saving that group's lives, since without him, Oft's group would have died. Haru was pretty shaken by this meeting, but decided to go downstairs, where he found an open reception. He decided to trade some of the emerald crystals he'd collected along the way. The glasses-wearing girl at the counter said she could appraise the crystals and give him a fair price. So Haru decided to try his luck and dumped a huge bag of crystals on the table, completely shocking the girl, who wondered who this man was. After that, Haru felt like a baller, claiming he had even more crystals ready. But the girl said they didn't have the capacity to check so many crystals right now and asked for a day's time. Haru agreed and started heading back to the main hall, where he discovered the girls had already registered at the guild. The adventurers seemed very surprised since almost all the girls were already level 30, which they never expected. But Haru knew he'd trained the girls enough that they could even easily defeat a level 40 adventurer. Finally, one of the Thinker girls pushed Haru inside so he could register too. Even though he hadn't planned to work as an adventurer, he decided to try his luck, since this was the moment he could impress all the girls and finally give God his incel life. He walked proudly into the room where a blonde girl checked his stats, but called him a loser, saying he needed to be at least level 10 and also be in a group just to register at the guild. This completely crushed poor Haru, who fell to the ground and started begging for a second chance. But the girl told him to grow up and start grinding, since that was the only way he could get into a group with that ugly face. She said he could only start adventuring alone when he reached level 20 and wouldn't even be called a real adventurer until he hit level 30. He realized there was no way to get a group because of his loner skill, and he couldn't go alone since he wasn't even close to level 20. This destroyed him completely, and he wondered if he'd always be a loser. The class president felt sorry for Haru, so she cheered him up, and everyone soon headed to the inn to spend the night. After a long time, they finally got to sleep in real beds, which was all they wanted. But Haru still stayed awake in his own bed since he felt much more comfortable sleeping in the forest. The next morning, everyone went out to explore the city since it was pretty safe. Haru decided he should just take the money from the emeralds and go back to the forest, since the girls should be safe now. But unfortunately, the receptionist, along with her superiors, all apologized to Haru because they didn't even have enough money right now to pay for all his emeralds. The guildmaster came out, saying he brought so many emerald crystals that they didn't have enough people to count them, let alone pay for them. He asked Haru if he'd like to be paid in installments. For Haru, that was fine since he loved capitalism, and he received a heavy bag of $5,000 in dollars, which completely shocked him. He seemed pretty satisfied with what he got. But obviously, when a loser gets money, all the girls start turning into bloodsuckers, celebrating and getting ready to shop like it was their money. Gart, on the other hand, was a real bro, telling Haru to ditch these attention seekers and go after some real ones since he knew a place. Immediately, Haru's mouth started watering since he'd been practicing No Nut November and holding out for 23 days because of his skibidi toilet. The class president tried to stop him, but he ignored her and started walking with Gart, dreaming about all the girls he'd find. But he was disappointed again when he saw an old, run-down shop on the side of the road. Haru seemed pretty let down, but Gart promised this shop sold only the best items found in dungeons. Haru soon started looking at all the items for sale and realized Gart wasn't lying. These items were definitely unique and interesting. This led to a shopping spree as he started trying out different weapons, armor, and magical items, throwing everything into his cart. After shopping all day, his eye fell on a special necklace. He asked the weird guy what that necklace did, and he replied it could fuse multiple items into one. Haru thought that could be pretty useful when the class president arrived on the scene, telling him to stop shopping and go back to sleep. Unfortunately, Haru ended up slipping and accidentally fused all the items. The weird shopkeeper was horrified and cried, saying he couldn't fuse them before buying since all those items were worth over 60,000. This shocked Haru, who went into depression while Gart tried to negotiate the price down a bit. Meanwhile, the class president apologized, saying he only had 50,000. A few days passed after that, and Haru was still depressed since he was broke now, and there were still so many things he wanted to buy. He couldn't go out hunting for more crystals since he couldn't take missions before reaching level 20, and he couldn't even try to mingle with the girls since the class president would catch him and put him back in his place. After thinking for a bit, he decided it was time to leave city life behind. He grabbed Harry Potter's invisibility cloak and slipped right past all the girls in the area. After getting out of the tower for some reason, this giant idiot took off the cloak and started running like a madman through the streets, deciding to parkour his way out of the city walls. But he wasn't as cool as he thought, and he broke his balls at the top of the walls while the sporty girls from his class watched him slowly slide down the wall in pain, making sure he'd never be a father again. His plan failed spectacularly, and he was sent back to the tower. The next day, the class president told him to sit still and be a good boy as punishment for trying to run away. Haru pretended to agree with her orders and promised to stay put. But the moment they left, he quickly grabbed his cloak and just walked through the city again. This time, he kept the cloak on. He simply passed by the donut-faced guard at the gate and soon left the city walls, starting to run toward the forests. On the way, he spotted a destroyed village and a bunch of goblins nearby, which he ignored since he wasn't a hero, and kept walking toward home. On the way, he also spotted a carriage being robbed by a bunch of men. He paused for a moment, thinking if he should help, but realized these things probably happen every day in this world and tried to ignore it. Before he could run away, one of the thieves threw a spear at him, which he dodged while the others prepared to attack. He said he just wanted to be alone, but they started mocking the way he talked, which brought back some old memories. In his anger, he literally started frying them. The thieves soon decided to fight back and started using their special skills to attack him, which could have been dangerous. But these idiots were just bots who could only spam a single spell and quickly tired out. Soon after, a spoiled girl came out of the carriage and introduced herself as Marie, a noble, thanking him for saving her from the bandits and begging him to escort her the rest of the way since she was scared more bandits would attack. In exchange, she offered him a special reward, 2,000. Even though Haru wanted to go back to the forest, he couldn't refuse an offer like that and agreed to escort her through the dangerous forest, imagining monsters awaited them on the way. Soon they reached the city, and Haru didn't receive what Marie promised. He grew impatient and thought he shouldn't have accepted her request while pacing around the waiting room of her castle. He decided to go back to the forest immediately, but Marie came down after changing into new clothes and acted upset because Haru was trying to leave even though she was planning to treat him very well. He had no choice but to go with her. To his surprise, her way of thanking him was better than he expected. She treated him to a full meal that would make any vegan choke and die. He started devouring the meat like a savage, and Marie got annoyed with his lack of manners. Regardless, she rewarded him with a bag of money and a VIP ID card that let him come and go from the city as he pleased. To her annoyance, though, Haru didn't give her any attention since he was busy scarfing down the food. The next day, he was surrounded by the class president and other girls who wanted to know where he'd spent the night. Haru said he was invited to the mayor's house and assured them it wasn't because he was trying to run off to the forest. The girls believed him and then headed into the forest to level up and get some resources. As soon as they left, Haru prepared to leave the city too. This time he was confident the ID card would solve everything for him. Before leaving, he bought some things from the weird shopkeeper's store and some food for his comfortable lonely life in the forest. He also wrote a note to the class president so she wouldn't get mad, saying he was going to look for the athletes since he was worried about them. Since it wasn't completely false, Haru thought this would be enough to stop the class president from looking for him. With that, he went to the gate and showed his ID to the donut-faced guard to leave the city legally. He felt at home in the forest with the wild creatures and monsters living freely. He missed home and thought he could finally become a loner like he was born to be. Right then, an ogre attacked him from behind, but Haru easily knocked it out with his staff. However, he thought it was strange since ogres were usually found in the outer parts of the forest. He thought something fishy was happening there and walked deeper into the forest, where he found a huge blood stain on the ground. Haru panicked a little, imagining if this blood belonged to the nerds, which was unlikely since they were masters when it came to otherworldly things. He figured it was more likely the athlete's blood or the delinquents and decided to follow the massive trail of blood. He found the athletes badly injured, and his heart broke thinking they might have picked a fight with the delinquents and ended up dead. However, he saw one of them was still breathing and immediately threw all the healing potions he'd made from mushrooms onto them. He wished for them to recover, like Sam Sulek would, and his wish was granted when the athlete's leader opened his eyes. Haru took them to his cave, where they told him what really happened. They tried to confront the delinquents to protect the girls, but then Tanaka, who was supposed to be their pet nerd, betrayed them. He killed all the delinquents and even stole the overpowered weapons they received when they came to this world. They had no choice but to run from him. However, he caught them, and they were no match for him. The athlete said Tanaka was terrifyingly strong and was looking for the class president with unwavering determination. Even the bodybuilders were smart enough to realize Tanaka was looking for the hijack skill that must be with the class president. Haru was shocked that the athletes could think, and they said Tanaka lost track of the class president. So he beat them nearly to death, believing they would go looking for her to ask for help. However, the athletes were ready to sacrifice themselves and instead crawled toward Haru's cave so he'd be drawn there and Haru could do something about the situation. They asked for his help to defeat Tanaka. Even though he didn't want to get involved with others initially, he couldn't run from this fight. He told the athletes he'd handle Tanaka, but would fight alone. Everyone was shocked, but the athletes' leader trusted Haru had a plan. Haru told them to go quickly to the city and keep the girls safe while he handled things here. He knew having the athletes by his side would increase his chances of victory, but if they all died in the battle, the girls would be defenseless. That's why he thought fighting Tanaka was his cross to bear, and he planned to get stronger quickly. He started formulating a strategy to counter the powerful weapons Tanaka took from the athletes. As he saw when fighting the bandits, weapon skills were strong, but couldn't be stopped once they started. That's why he decided to create a new skill with no weakness. Right then, he spotted some goblins sniffing the blood trail and decided to use them as experience points. He quickly took down the high-level goblins, but they died in one hit and didn't give him much. Haru wished to fight a stronger enemy, and suddenly he sensed a powerful monster nearby. He turned around and came face to face with the Goblin King, who attacked without warning. Haru barely dodged the relentless blows of the Goblin King and noticed it was using a weapon skill. He knew one hit would send him to the afterlife, but decided to defeat the monster and get stronger. He combined his various skills and strengthened his staff to knock down the Goblin King in one blow. He was satisfied with his strategy and evolution when an even more powerful monster appeared behind him. It was a Goblin Emperor, level 50, and Haru realized he couldn't do anything if he faced it head-on. So he did exactly that and charged at the Goblin Emperor with the new gambit skill he'd developed. He managed to hit the Goblin Emperor, but his attack barely did any damage. The monster got up and walked like Jackie Chan, the drunken master, before suddenly attacking Haru, just grazing his face. He kept dodging the Goblin Emperor's rain of attacks and then launched a counterattack when he saw an opening. He managed to significantly reduce the monster's health bar, but it used a healing skill to restore its health and even increase its strength. The monster then sent a flying slash at Haru, throwing him against the trees behind him. He was tired and ragged, but deluded himself into thinking he was being a wimp, since the bodybuilder survived worse injuries than his, so he should be fine at this level. He got up and attacked the Goblin Emperor, After fighting all night, Haru finally managed to defeat it and reached level 11. He let out a victory roar to celebrate and then went back to his forest home. He checked his stats after leveling up and discovered more about how to use his skills. The gambit attack he created earlier was now registered as a skill. Haru was confident it had no weaknesses, which would be useful in the fight against Tanaka. Later that night, while Haru was outside his cave, Tanaka came to face him. He was disappointed because he'd expected the bodybuilders to lead him to the class president, but instead, they brought him to the class outcast. He said it was a shame he hadn't found the class president even after everything he'd done, including manipulating the stupid delinquents and dividing the class into separate groups. Haru got furious and asked what he did to the other guys. Tanaka said he'd killed them a long time ago. He didn't even consider Haru a threat and told him to relax with his useless skills in the forest. Haru pointed his staff at him, and Tanaka told him to take that dirty, smelly stick out of his face. That's what she said. Haru said that even as an outcast, he would protect the class president. Tanaka smiled threateningly as he said he'd kill him first. With that, Tanaka unleashed all his power and sent some rocks flying at Haru as a warning. He then said that in the White Room, when everyone was choosing skills, he went last and made sure all the remaining skills were garbage. He smirked, asking Haru if he could defeat him with those useless skills, and then sent bigger rocks at him. Haru prepared to defend himself, but then Tanaka used his unique skill called adjustment. As a result, Haru's body started failing, and he found it hard to move. Despite this, he dodged the rocks somehow, and then Tanaka summoned crystal spikes right under his feet. Haru evaded those too, but was exhausted now because his body was much heavier. Tanaka admitted he was better than he thought, and then asked how long he'd suspected him. Haru answered that he'd doubted him from the first moment. He knew Tanaka wanted to hang out with the nerds or become an outcast, but was shocked to see him with the delinquents and thought there must be some reason behind it. After that, Haru asked when he started acting on this plan. Tanaka revealed he thought of it as soon as they were teleported from the classroom. He lost the chance to inherit the hijack skill, but then saw the adjustment skill, which could manipulate targets slightly, so he chose it. He manipulated the stupid delinquents, and the rest was history. Tanaka said they'd talked enough and tied Haru's foot with a vine. He then launched a powerful fire spell at him, thinking that would be enough to kill him. But to his surprise, Haru absorbed the flames into his staff, thanks to the power of the herb that had fused with him. He immediately went on the counterattack to take down Tanaka while he was still in shock. But it turned out Tanaka was just acting. He pulled out a sword from nowhere to block Haru's attack, and then pushed him back. Next, he summoned all the weapons in his arsenal, saying he'd finally be able to try them all out. He charged at Haru with a sword and rapidly switched weapons with every strike. Haru was completely on the defensive, barely able to fend off Tanaka's unpredictable and fast attacks. He tried hiding in the bushes but was hit by a powerful attack that sent him flying across the river. Haru realized he wasn't strong enough to face Tanaka and wondered how he could use so many weapons and powers at once. Tanaka arrived and asked him to give up, but Haru got up and asked if he was using the mimic skill to copy his classmates' abilities. Tanaka confirmed and added that he was planning to use it to copy the class president's hijack skill and then kill her to access its true power. After that, it wouldn't take long to kill everyone and steal their skills too. Haru realized he was up against his toughest enemy yet, and Tanaka started attacking him with different weapons. Haru tried to fight back but only hit an illusion, and the real Tanaka was behind him. He thought this tactic wouldn't work, so he pointed his staff at the ground, and Tanaka thought he'd given up. He charged at him, but Haru dodged the attack by mimicking Goku's superior instinct, and then asked Tanaka if he could use a copied skill only 3 times. This hit a nerve, and Tanaka started to panic. He lost control of the situation, and Haru said he'd discovered the weakness of his mimic skill a long time ago and purposely made him waste his copied skills. Tanaka was furious at being tricked, but Haru knew he still had at least 1 copy of each skill. Tanaka attacked him in desperation, but Haru dodged and then knocked him down with a kick. He decided to end him quickly using this opening. But then Tanaka suddenly fired a powerful shot at him, making him stop. He was determined not to lose, so he decided to use his ultimate weapon. Tanaka summoned a dagger and moved quickly toward Haru, landing 2 quick blows before disappearing and appearing above him. Haru dodged everything, but as dust filled the air, he realized this was just a decoy. Tanaka had something else up his sleeve. He was right because Tanaka was hiding behind a rock, charging his ultimate skill called Instant Death. He hit Haru with it, and true to its name, the skill ended his life instantly. He fell to the ground, and Tanaka came out laughing like an evil genius. He stepped on Haru's head and decided to go on his way. But then suddenly Haru got up and asked why he was leaving so soon. Tanaka freaked out and asked how the hell he could be alive after being hit by instant death. Haru revealed he had the general health skill, which made him resistant to status effects, and instant death was one of them. He also had his luck stat maxed out, meaning the success rate of instant death was greatly reduced. Tanaka lost his mind and asked why he passed out then, and Haru said it was an act. Tanaka still couldn't believe it and said it should be impossible for him to move so quickly while under his adjustment skill. Haru revealed another secret. He used another skill called Hard Head, which allowed him to control others like a puppet, and used it on himself to cancel the effect of adjustment. Tanaka could no longer control himself and immediately started spamming his weapon skills at Haru, who blocked them easily. The nerd fell to his knees, unable to believe his perfect calculations had failed. He remembered how he was always bored in school because he was a genius ahead of everyone. He wished for a way to cure his boredom and was then teleported to this world with the rest of his classmates. The moment he saw the skill list, Tanaka knew the choices he had to make his life more exciting. He was more than willing to kill his classmates for it and thought that once he had all the skills, he'd be perfect and unbeatable. He couldn't believe he lost to someone with useless skills. In his madness, he charged recklessly at Haru. Haru disarmed him easily and, thinking Tanaka was out of tricks, went in to finish him off. However, his sword returned and pierced Haru, who realized Tanaka was still hiding his remote control skills. Tanaka declared he still won in the end as he started striking Haru, but then Haru punched him away. He'd managed to block the damage with his packaging skill and then decided to end the battle using the gambit skill to land a blow Tanaka couldn't dodge. Tanaka lost consciousness and fell to the ground. Haru walked away, saying even without overpowered skills, he had his tricks. However, he was also completely exhausted now, and the damage finally started showing its effect on his body. He didn't have the strength to keep moving and fell to his knees, thinking this was the end. He thought of the class president and his friends just as he was about to lose consciousness, but someone supported him. Haru opened his eyes and saw the nerds there. He was disappointed they arrived too late, but they told him to complain later. They gave him some healing potions and supported him as they headed back to the city. Haru asked what they were doing in the forest, and they revealed that when they were returning from a hunt, they saw their classmates and heard from the bodybuilders that he was trying to fight Tanaka. So they immediately ran to help him but were a little late. Soon they reached the city, and everyone was waiting for them at the gates. The girls surrounded Haru, offering themselves as his reward, but he nervously backed away and hit the athlete's leader's hand. The girls dragged him inside, and the TikTok influencer girl apologized to the nerds for her past actions. Haru thought this was the happy ending everyone wanted, and now he had no role here. He decided to sneak away while everyone was busy, but the class president stopped him and asked where the hell he was going. He freaked out, and then she suddenly hugged him, saying she was very worried about him. Haru apologized, but the class president said an apology wouldn't be enough. She gathered all the girls in the class to scold him for leaving the city without telling them. Haru freaked out, but he had no choice as the girls dragged him back into the city to scold him and then suck his soul dry. Later that night, Haru had a dream about someone chained at the bottom of a dungeon, waiting for someone to come. The chained person appeared as a girl one moment and a skeleton the next. Haru woke up instantly when the dream ended and wondered if it could be hinting at something. The next day, when he woke up and went to the tavern, he found the nerd group there, ready to venture into the dungeon to hunt some monsters. They told Haru they were looking for a rare item that increased their Riz points and changed how other people saw them. Haru said it was perfect for nerds like them that nobody liked, and they replied they could say the same about him. After they left, Haru thought that since his work here was done, he should really go back to his cozy cave in the forest. But the class president was right behind him. She was furious he was trying to run away again and was ready to go Super Saiyan on him. Haru begged for mercy since he'd been scolded for 1,000,000 hours last night. But the class president said that was the collective scolding from all the girls, and her personal scolding wasn't over yet. Haru started sweating and fell to his knees, promising not to do anything dangerous again. The class president finally left him alone. He was still shaken, but then thought about the item the nerds mentioned. He thought if he could use it to increase his affinity with the class president and others, he'd never be scolded again and could go back to his outcast life in peace. So he decided to go to the dungeon too, but on the way he suddenly ran into a bunch of pig monsters ready to hunt some humans. However, Haru thought they were just the right warm-up for him. Back in the city, the class president was receiving a monster subjugation mission from the guild master when the noble girl Marie came running in, telling them about a massive monster outbreak. She said a huge horde of ogres was approaching their city and had already destroyed some villages in their path. The adventurers immediately prepared to fight the ogres, and the class president also volunteered to help in the fight. She ran back to the inn to gather everyone, but then wondered where Haru had gone. Right now, he was advancing toward the ogres while analyzing the situation. He quickly took down the smaller ogres and then moved on to their boss. He attacked the ogre king with his staff, but it didn't do much damage. Haru spammed the king with powerful attacks until it was knocked out, and then resumed walking to the dungeon. He soon found the dungeon and used his stealth skill to enter without alerting the guard outside. The otaku inside him was super excited to explore a dungeon, and he quickly found a treasure chest. However, it was just garbage, to his great disappointment. Haru tried other treasure chests too, but they were all more useless than my college degree. He started thinking he should have asked an expert before coming to the dungeon. This immediately reminded him of the weird guy who sold special items found in dungeons, and he decided to talk to him about it. Haru ran back to the city, where the adventurers and the girls stood firm waiting for the ogre attack. They'd been waiting since noon and now wondered if the ogres were actually coming or not. Suddenly, they spotted someone coming through the dust cloud, but it was just Haru. The class president was shocked to see him and immediately ran over. He asked why everyone was at the gate and why they lit a bonfire. The class president said a nearby village was attacked by monsters, and now this city was also in danger. She said while they were here trying to protect the city, he was fooling around somewhere without knowing the danger. Haru got nervous, thinking another night of scolding awaited him when he suddenly heard a guy talking about the ogres. He nervously revealed that he might have annihilated the entire horde of ogres on the way. This news left everyone speechless. While everyone was impressed with his strength, his classmates were furious because he'd done something dangerous right after promising not to again. Later, they went back to the guild, where Marie and the guild master thanked Haru, but the class president was still complaining and muttering about him doing dangerous things. The girls told Haru they were scolding him for his own good because monsters had been getting stronger and more violent lately, which was an early sign of a monster stampede. This time, even the guild master and Marie asked him not to do anything dangerous, and he promised them just like politicians promise things every 4 years. The next day, Haru visited the weird shopkeeper, who freaked out seeing him and said he had nothing to sell today. However, Haru told him he wasn't here for items, but for information about an item that could increase someone's affinity. The Voldemort cousin talked about pheromone rings, which made Haru's blood rush to his groin, and he asked where he could find it. The light version Voldemort said the rings would probably be in an area of the dungeon that hadn't been explored yet, and those places could only be found from the 50th floor onward. Haru was excited, but the weirdo warned him that each floor had a boss monster that needed to be defeated to get to the next. The weirdo was just trying to sell potions by scaring him, but Haru said he'd get some from Temu. However, the nerd gang overheard this, and they immediately told the girls about his plans. They were more determined than ever to stop Haru from risking his life and using risky items. They followed him angrily and confronted him about the pheromone ring. Haru made up a story about looking for the Ring of Solomon, which turns a person into a Disney princess and lets them talk to animals. But no one was buying it. So he just ran to the dungeon, and the guard did nothing but tell him not to enter. The rest of his classmates followed him, and the class president told him to stop running or he'd get caught in a trap. Haru was confident in his maxed-out luck stat, but then suddenly he touched a wall that crumbled, and he fell straight through the hole. He kept falling for a long time and used earth magic to make the ground bouncy, like Luffy's Gear 5. Thanks to this, he didn't get hurt from the landing and then started looking around to figure out where he was. In his struggle to explore the dark region, he suddenly learned the spatial awareness skill, along with trap detection. He immediately used both skills to scan the area and discovered he was on the 11th floor. Since the dungeon was said to be only 100 floors deep, he was terrified he might face an extremely strong boss monster here, but still walked through the corridors filled with dark mana. He reached a room at the end of the hall, and when he opened the door, a strong gust of wind from overwhelming mana almost knocked him down. Haru wondered who could have such strong mana when he suddenly saw the chained skeleton from his dreams the night before. He kept walking toward the skeleton monster and discovered it was the Dungeon Emperor who ruled the entire place. It was a level 100 monster, and Haru started sweating cold as he realized what he was facing. He used his appraisal skill on the Dungeon Emperor, but all its stats and skills were hidden. What was revealed was enough to terrify him to his soul, because the Emperor belonged to multiple monster races like Lich and Dullahan. Haru thought he couldn't beat the Dungeon Emperor in long-range combat, so he quickly decided to get close and land a surprise blow. However, the boss monster easily blocked the attack, and Haru decided to use his overwhelming speed against it using his gambit skill. However, the boss blocked that easily too. Now Haru started sweating cold, realizing this fight would be his hardest yet. Despite that, he was determined to find a way to discover a weakness in the Dungeon Emperor and defeat it. To counter the Dungeon Emperor's super speed, Haru decided to use all his magical power to boost his speed. He charged at the Dungeon Emperor and attacked, but it easily blocked. Haru decided to go even faster, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't break through the Dungeon Emperor's defenses and land a hit. Suddenly, he saw a vision of himself getting stabbed in the heart and dodged out of the Dungeon Emperor's way as it thrust its blade toward him. Haru thanked his divine vision skill, which manifested in his contact lenses after he observed the boss monster's absurdly fast movements. This new skill allowed him to see slightly into the future, but he knew if he let his guard down for a second, he'd become a kebab. To keep his thoughts from distracting him, he charged at the Dungeon Emperor and kept swinging his weapon without stopping. The adrenaline of fighting a life-or-death battle started taking over his mind, and he felt electrified. However, he quickly reached his limits, and as he swung his staff, he fell to the ground. He was sweating profusely and breathing heavily because he'd exhausted his mana and stamina, but his enemy remained the same. He tried to get up as the Dungeon Emperor walked toward him, but there wasn't enough strength in his legs. Luckily, the Dungeon Emperor just waited for him to recover his strength. Haru wondered why it wasn't attacking, but then suddenly realized the Dungeon Emperor hadn't shown a single hint of killing intent during the whole fight. He realized the boss monster knew it could kill any intruder without difficulty, which was why it wasn't showing hostility toward him. Haru got up and told the Dungeon Emperor to stop underestimating him. He charged and attacked the Emperor, who swung its sword without much enthusiasm, giving Haru a chance to sneak behind it. Haru tried to use this chance to land a blow, but the Dungeon Emperor was ready for that too, and casually pointed its sword at his throat to show he couldn't be beaten. At first, Haru was annoyed the Dungeon Emperor wasn't taking him seriously, but then he started doubting. He saw the dark, threatening aura around the skeleton monster and wondered if it was being controlled by that aura. Haru now understood the Dungeon Emperor was being forced to fight against its will when suddenly he saw his staff glow and absorb the dark aura. He didn't understand how his staff gained the power to fight such a dark curse, but decided to use it and extract all the dark aura. He attacked the Dungeon Emperor and started sucking the dark aura into his staff. Then, taking the right opportunity, he struck the aura above the Dungeon Emperor, completely nullifying it. As soon as Haru did this, the Dungeon Emperor put down its sword, and he understood it never wanted to fight him. Instead, it wanted to break free from the dark aura's control and be laid to eternal rest. Haru approached the skeleton warrior peacefully. Suddenly, it dropped its sword, and darkness began returning to its body. Haru thought he should kill the Dungeon Emperor before it suffered again at the hands of darkness and raised his staff but couldn't strike. Instead, he hugged the Dungeon Emperor, thinking it was also a loner like him. To his surprise, his gesture touched the Dungeon Emperor's soul and activated the bondage skill, transforming it into his servant. Haru freaked out seeing this, but at least he didn't have to deal with the dungeon's darkness anymore. What a relief! He asked the Dungeon Emperor if it hated being his servant, and it shook its head to show it didn't. Haru realized the skeleton warrior understood him and wasn't hostile. He decided to use his appraisal skill on it again to see if anything had changed, and discovered its level and species had been reset. Moreover, he could see the skeleton warrior's true name. It turned out she was a girl named Angelica before becoming a skeleton, and Haru freaked out thinking the class president would fight him for using bondage on another girl. He then thought that since this was a skeleton, it should be fine. After all, it's not like she was a real girl, right? He decided to go back to the city with his new servant and found a door leading to the 100th floor of the dungeon. Haru saw some stairs and thought they could easily go up now, but suddenly the floormaster appeared before him. It was a living armor, level 100, and Haru lost hope because he wasn't in any condition to fight more. The skeleton warrior Angelica was trying not to kill him, but the living armor didn't seem in the mood to show mercy. Haru suddenly had an idea that didn't involve using stairs, and he used earth magic to create a hole in the ceiling and go up to the next floor. However, there were two furious minotaurs, level 99, looking at him there, and they jumped to join the fight. Well, Haru had the devil's luck, and the minotaurs jumped right on top of the living armor, defeating it and taking enough fall damage to reduce their HP to just 1 point. He finished them off with just 1 hit, and then Angelica pointed at the armor, hinting she wanted it. How clever. Haru told her to go ahead, and she put on the armor, which was too big for her. However, it magically adjusted to her size and even fixed her 3 measurements for Haru's delight. How wonderful. He decided to appraise her armor and found it was cursed. But this upset Angelica because, like any other girl, she expected a compliment. What a letdown, Haru. She started stomping up the stairs angrily, and Haru just followed her. Back to Haru's location, he found a way to improve Angelica's mood. He gave her his old robes so she could look more elegant. While she admired herself, Haru's spider sense tingled, and he sensed danger nearby. Here comes trouble. Suddenly, a level 98 lich appeared, and upon appraising it, Haru discovered only divine magic worked on it. The lich attacked him, and he barely dodged before remembering his staff had some kind of divine spell. How lucky! He activated his staff's divine power and poked the lich with it, easily defeating it without effort. On the next floor, Haru found a bunch of poisonous moths. But he knew their obvious weakness. He sent a fireball into the middle of the moth group, and they were all attracted to it. He then poured more mana into the fireball to make it bigger, eliminating all the moths at once. What a show. On the next floor, he found the caterpillars that would one day become the moths. Luckily, they also had the weapon of their own ruin in the form of sticky threads. Haru used the thread and earth magic to create an earth carpet and rolled it over the caterpillars, killing them all without any effort. What a genius. However, his streak of easy victories was interrupted on the 95th floor when he sensed a sinister aura around him. Strong winds started blowing as he approached the boss, which was a living sword, level 100. How dangerous. Haru thought it was strange the boss was at a higher level than the floor, and it didn't seem like it would be as easy to defeat as the previous bosses. The sword attacked them, and Haru quickly moved behind its exposed back to defeat it, a clever tactic. However, the sword deflected and launched a counterattack that shocked Haru. He somehow dodged, and then one of the smaller swords also attacked him. He realized he couldn't keep up with this type of enemy, but knew who could. What a relief. So he called Angelica and told her to handle the sword monsters, since this was her area of expertise. Angelica released her powerful aura as she drew her sword. The living sword also released all its power in response. Angelica charged straight at it, and Haru panicked, thinking this wasn't the best strategy. To his surprise, Angelica easily overpowered the living sword and destroyed it in one blow. What power! Haru realized he was lucky Angelica didn't want to kill him when they fought, but now she was his strongest ally. How great! On the other hand, Haru's classmates had reached the 50th floor while searching for him, where they fought a terrible 4-armed cyclops. They couldn't withstand the giant monster and were on the verge of being annihilated. The athletes' leader and the nerds' leader started wondering what Haru would do in such a situation, and suddenly reached an understanding about what they should do. A light at the end of the tunnel. They would support the class president, who was struggling on the front line, and told her about the plan. The plan was risky, but the athletes' leader convinced the class president to agree. He used his hyper-acceleration skill to overwhelm the Cyclops with his speed while the girls distracted it with magical attacks. The Cyclops slapped him before he could do anything, but that was part of the plan. What a hit! The athlete's leader was just a decoy meant to distract the Cyclops while the nerd's leader charged his bow. He fired his most powerful attack and exploded the Cyclops' eye, defeating it. The whole class celebrated. Victory. Meanwhile, Haru and Angelica climbed up the floors. The dungeon suddenly started shaking as a massive horde of monsters moved. Back at the dungeon entrance, the guard was complaining about how no one respected him, and the students entered the dungeon despite him warning them about a monster stampede. What a situation. Suddenly, all the dungeon rats ran out, and when the guard turned, he was shocked to see threatening slime monsters coming toward him. He freaked out and ran to the Adventurers Guild, informing the guild master the stampede had begun. How desperate. The noble Marie was also there with some experienced adventurers, and everyone was worried about the stampede. The guild master took out an ancient scroll from his shelf showing the dungeon map. What a relic. He explained that dungeons were like living creatures, growing by expanding underground. Once they reached their final floor, their growth points stopped, and a large number of monsters were generated that ran out because the dungeon could no longer contain them. Overpopulation. The scroll also said the only way to stop a stampede was to kill the dungeon boss on the lowest floor because defeating the boss would make all the monsters disappear. The adventurers asked who could do that. Marie immediately thought of Heracu. Suddenly the ground shook as monsters started attacking the city. The guild master sent one adventurer to evacuate the citizens and another to gather all adventurers and soldiers at the city gate to defend it. A race against time. Inside the dungeon, Heracu was still climbing without any difficulty. How easy. He found a bunch of griffins on one floor and threw some poisoned fish to them. The griffins immediately ate them and soon fell unconscious on the ground. Mission accomplished. Heracu just hit them and turned them into XP, then went up the stairs. How efficient. Back at the city gates, the adventurers repelled the first wave of the stampede, but many of them were seriously injured. Marie was worried now, and suddenly one of the adventurers remembered the students entered the dungeon earlier today, and Heracu was with them. The guild master thought about this and said Heracu was probably the only one who could kill the dungeon boss and end the stampede. What responsibility. He wanted to deliver this message to him, and everyone wondered who would do it. They looked at Marie because she was the only one not contributing to the fight, so she might as well be a messenger. How awkward. She was terrified and teary-eyed hearing this, saying she couldn't go alone to a monster-infested place. The guildmaster understood her concerns and sent the guy named Oft to escort her. How gentlemanly. Oft said if he went to the dungeon, they'd have one less capable warrior here. But the guildmaster said he was Whitebeard's illegitimate son and swore on his mustache he'd hold back any monster that came here. What a promise. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Heracu reached the 80th floor, which had an aquatic theme and piranha-like monsters. While wondering what to do and taking a peek at the water, some piranhas attacked him. What a fright. Luckily, Angelica protected him by cutting the fish. What a heroine. Heracu remembered seeing these fish at the market, but they were frozen, so he used ice magic to lower the water temperature, slowing the fish down. He then used his packaging skills to freeze them in ice, and it worked. What a tactic. He thought they'd clear this floor easily now and ran on the support stones, freezing any fish near him. Suddenly, a giant piranha jumped out of the water, and Heracu realized it was the floor boss. What a surprise. It seemed angry at him for freezing its family and attacked him with a huge wave. How vengeful. Angelica abandoned Heracu at the last moment, and he was dragged underwater. How disappointing. However, he made a surfboard with earth magic and propelled himself upward instantly. He surfed the wave and then jumped toward the giant piranha's head, knocking it out with a solid blow. How stylish. After confirming the boss monster was defeated, Heracu felt safe and cheerfully resumed his journey to the top of the dungeon. He felt even more confident in his abilities now and climbed quickly. How confident. On the 79th floor, he found the Pilgrim's Ring, which brought happiness and protected against bad luck. How lucky. On the 77th floor, he found the Blessed Bracelet, which could dispel a curse but only once. On the 75th floor, he defeated the floor boss and obtained the Necromancy Orb, which could control the living and the dead. How powerful. Heracu was excited to find all this treasure, but then realized he wasn't cursed or unlucky. Suddenly he turned and offered the ring and bracelet to Angelica, saying she could free herself from her curse and find happiness using them. He even added the Necromancy Orb as a bonus. Angelica tried to refuse, but Heracu insisted girls liked accessories, so she should accept them. How stubborn. In the end, Angelica took the 3 treasure items, and their powers suddenly started acting on her, transforming her. Heracu didn't notice and ran off to explore the dungeon, while Angelica removed her helmet to reveal she had turned into a real human now. What a surprise. She quickly put her helmet back on to go after Heracu. How eager. On the other hand, Heracu's classmates had just finished a long, difficult fight with the werewolf pack when they suddenly sensed someone coming toward them. They thought it was another monster, but luckily it turned out to be Marie. What a relief. She told everyone about the stampede and how they needed Heracu's help. But upon learning he had separated from the rest of the team, Marie lost all hope. How disheartening. The class president comforted her and then told everyone they didn't have time to rest because they needed to find Heracu even faster now. Haste is the enemy of perfection, but here it was necessary. Meanwhile, Haru was playing "The Floor is Lava" with the dungeon. How dangerous. He was somehow enduring the heat while crossing a bridge over the lava lake when he almost fell to his death. Angelica held him and told him to rest in the corner, and Haru accepted the idea. What good sense. He wondered how he could recover the stamina he lost from the heat. How suffocating. Suddenly he found a gentle breeze blowing from a hole in the wall, and he put his head in and used wind magic to cool himself. How clever. Coincidentally, the other end of the hole was on the floor where everyone else was, and the class president heard Haru approaching the fresh air. She called him, and Haru responded. What a reunion. He realized this was the hole he'd fallen through and wondered if he could get out of it. He remembered he couldn't do it last time and asked the class president if anyone had a rope. They didn't have anything to help him. But when Haru found out they were on the 54th floor, he thought he could get there quickly. How optimistic. The class president stopped and then told him the city was in danger. She told him about the stampede, and then Marie and Oft told him he needed to defeat the boss to end it. Haru just looked at Angelica and then told everyone he'd already defeated the boss, which surprised them all. Everyone was amazed to hear this and wondered how there could be a second wave of the stampede if the boss was defeated. The adventurer asked Haru if he was sure he killed the boss because killing it was the solution to the monster stampede. What a dilemma. Haru realized if he was going to save the city, he needed to kill Angelica. What a terrible situation. He started thinking about how she was just a girl, trapped in the dungeon all this time, and he'd formed a close bond with her now. What a moral dilemma. He didn't want to kill her and told everyone he hadn't killed the boss. What courage. He started thinking of a way to keep the city safe without sending Angelica to the afterlife. He decided he'd do whatever it took and told Angelica he'd need her help. What a partnership. He then declared to his classmates that he himself would stop the stampede, and they were shocked because there was no other way to stop it except killing the boss. However, the class president said she believed in Haru because he might be a pathetic loner who made them worry, but he always stepped up when a hero was needed, even if a bit clumsy. She reminded everyone how Haru had saved them time and time again, which was the reason for her confidence in him. Hearing her words gave Haru a new dose of confidence, and he swore he'd save the city and Angelica, too. What determination. With this motivation, Haru and Angelica started speedrunning the dungeon, reaching the 73rd floor in no time. How agile. They found some lizardmen there, but Haru knew they were weak to cold, so he quickly froze them with ice magic, and then Angelica smashed them. Teamwork. On the next floor, they found some scorpions, and Haru used smoke to do pest control on them. What a method. Next, they faced a two-headed dog that was strong and fast, but Haru threw his bottled farts at its nose to completely neutralize its sensitive sense of smell. What a secret weapon. The two-headed dog could no longer concentrate on the battle, making it easy for Angelica to cut it in two. Victory guaranteed. After that, Haru decided to organize all the items he'd gotten from defeating monsters, and Angelica signaled him to take a well-deserved short rest. He replied he couldn't afford to delay since the fate of the whole city rested on his shoulders. What responsibility. They soon reached the 69th floor where a hypnotic bird used its ability on them to make them sleep. How dangerous. Haru thought this wouldn't affect him because of his general health skills, but he was too tired and the skill didn't activate in time, making him very sleepy. How unlucky. He dozed off, but luckily Angelica wasn't affected, so she carried him on her back and told him to keep resting. What a partner. On the other hand, Haru's classmates were fighting a level 100 Sphinx, stronger than any opponent they'd faced so far. How challenging. They couldn't do lasting damage to it because it healed instantly from physical and magical damage. What a problem. The adventurer named Oft told them they couldn't defeat the Sphinx even if they could damage it because rumors said it was immortal. What a legend. He explained the Sphinx liked to give riddles to adventurers and only let those who answered correctly pass. How clever. He said attacking it was a bad idea because now it was determined to finish off the students. How troublesome. Meanwhile, Angelica had carried Haru to the 59th floor, and he was finally ready to join the action again. What a comeback. While trying to find a way past the crumbling floor, he suddenly sensed a familiar presence upstairs. It turned out to be his classmates, who had been completely defeated by the Sphinx. What a situation. The giant monster attacked the class president, but suddenly Haru arrived on the scene and attacked it with his new fused magical equipment to nullify its physical damage immunity. What a triumphant entrance. Although his initial attack didn't cause damage, it gave Angelica the chance to attack the Sphinx and cut off its head, killing it for good. Victory. After that, Haru and the class president faced each other, and she welcomed him back, saying everyone was waiting for his return. What a moment. Everyone told him he was late. Then the class president asked about the night with him. What an indiscreet question. Haru was about to introduce her when the ground beneath them crumbled, and he started falling again into the depths of the dungeon. How unlucky. However, he used some Spider-Man moves to step on the falling debris and got back on solid ground. How agile. He told everyone not to worry since he had plenty of new skills to protect himself from any danger. But no sooner had he spoken than the ground crumbled again, and he jinxed himself. Haru was totally unprepared and accepted his fate. But the class president ran to him and grabbed his hand. She remembered how she'd failed to protect him last time, so she swore she wouldn't let him go now. The head nerd and head athlete came to help pull Haru up, but there was no time to relax because the third wave of the stampede was already on the floor below. Everyone panicked, and the class president asked Haru if he had a plan to save the city. He told her he had a plan, and Angelica was the key to it. The class president asked him about her, but then Marie panicked and said they needed to get back to the city immediately. Oft agreed and said they'd use the warp portal to reach the surface directly. Haru was shocked because he hadn't seen anything like that when he was climbing. Then Oft explained he hadn't seen it because he was climbing through the shaft, and the mechanism didn't work in that situation. Soon, Haru and the group arrived at the city gates, where the guildmaster and others watched, waiting for the third wave of monsters. Suddenly, the third wave arrived, much larger than the previous ones. As creatures flooded the plains and griffins filled the sky, the adventurers filled with fear, because the first two waves were just warm-ups. This was another level. Everyone lost hope of winning. But then Haru signaled Angelica. She stepped forward and drew her sword, plunging the blade into the ground, releasing immense energy that spread in all directions, covering the city and the dungeon area. Haru thought that since Angelica was indeed the dungeon boss and had casually killed monsters while climbing, maybe she also had absolute control over the creatures. He was sure her power could make all the monsters disappear at once. His gamble paid off when the massive magical field created by Angelica erased all the creatures from existence in seconds. Everyone was stunned to see that. Then Haru went to Angelica for a fist bump. He sighed with relief, saying the plan really worked. His classmates were even more confused and asked if that was his power. Haru said it wasn't him, but Angelica who performed the miracle, and she started getting shy. The head nerd was the only one smart enough to understand Angelica was the dungeon emperor. Everyone panicked hearing this. Haru said there was no reason to worry. Angelica was completely on their side and had saved his skin dozens of times in the dungeon. The adventurers believed Haru and accepted Angelica wasn't a threat. But the head nerd still had questions. He asked Haru if the knight was really the great boss of the dungeon, with power even greater than the boss monsters. Haru confirmed that Angelica was indeed the strongest in the dungeon. He said a lot of things happened and her level was reset, but she was still stronger than most monsters in the dungeon. He thought this power would be enough to force the monsters to obey, but he had to be very close to them to use it. The girls asked what happened to the monsters, worried they might attack again. Haru replied they must be quiet in their floors, since it was an order from the dungeon emperor. He declared the city was safe now, and everyone cheered. They celebrated, partied, and peace quickly returned. The next day, Haru decided to have an event with all the items he'd gotten in the dungeon. Soon the class president appeared with the crew as he'd asked, and they were stunned to see the collection of rare weapons and armor on display. Haru announced with a proud air that everything there was on Black Friday sale. Everyone rushed to buy things, and just mentioning a sale gave the girls the superpower to push the guys aside. Luckily, Haru saved some extra items and, being a bro, shared them with the boys. In no time, everyone got something and was very busy testing the equipment. Haru was happy because their lives would get easier, but worried about Angelica. Imagining she'd lost all social skills after so long in the dungeon. He wondered if she'd managed to fit in with the group now that she'd be living with them. While the friends thought Haru was a saint for sharing rare loot, he was busy counting the gold he received in exchange. At that moment, the class president came to talk to him, and he quickly hid the gold before she accused him of being a heartless capitalist. She thanked Haru for providing rare items, and when Angelica arrived, she greeted her too. Then she asked him to properly introduce the knight. Haru said she was Angelica, a formidable skeleton warrior who was the dungeon emperor he defeated. The class president asked if he used a pheromone ring on Angelica to make her follow him. He sighed, explaining he never had that ring. She wanted to know how the emperor obeyed him. Haru nervously revealed he used the bondage skill to make her his servant. The class president screamed at him, calling him a pervert. She took Angelica's hand and ran off to get her away from Haru, while he worried something weird might happen between Angelica and the others. The class president took Angelica to the girls' dormitory, where they all lined up on one side like a panel interview to get to know her better. They were surprised to learn that despite being the dungeon emperor, Angelica was 17 like them. But she didn't seem very interested in talking with the girls, and the class president held her hand to comfort her. Now she realized Haru had accidentally used the bondage skill on her, and that was what freed her from the dungeon's curse. She felt sorry for the poor girl, and decided to help her integrate into the group. To that end, she immediately took her to the group bath with the others. Angelica was delighted to see a huge tank where she could join the other girls. While everyone started undressing, she had trouble removing her armor. The class president went to help, thinking that even as a skeleton, every girl deserved a good bath. However, when she found a normal human leg under her stockings, she was stunned, as were the others. They helped remove her armor completely and were amazed to see Angelica was a beautiful blonde who took their breath away. Meanwhile, Haru was resting in his room, thinking that even without finding the pheromone ring, he'd gone up 6 levels and gained many skills. He concluded that since he wouldn't have stopped the monster massacre without Angelica's help, he still wasn't strong enough and needed to train more. The next day, he entered the inn excited and asked the class president if he could go back to the forest to take care of something. The class president realized he still didn't know the truth about Angelica and wanted to keep this pervert away from her, so she allowed him to go to the forest as long as he returned on time. Haru was thrilled and invited Angelica to come along. Afraid of being bored in the city, she agreed to join him. But the class president freaked out, imagining the two alone. She tried to stop Haru, but then caught herself thinking about why the idea of him alone with a girl upset her so much. She ended up wishing him well, and Haru said goodbye. Arriving at the forest, he tested a new skill called phase, which turned him into a flash for a few seconds. Accidentally running too fast, he plunged off a cliff but used his powers to land lightly. Right then, Angelica appeared following him, slipped on some mushrooms, and fell off the cliff. Haru caught her and commented she was surprisingly heavy for a pile of bones, making her embarrassed. He went back to the cave and relaxed in the jacuzzi, teasing Angelica to join him, knowing she'd refuse just because she was a girl, even as a skeleton. But Angelica was legally required to obey his commands, so she appeared in the bathroom in just a towel, and Haru nearly died of nerves. He soon realized she was the knight and took her to the room to learn more. He discovered that, like the class president, she didn't speak confidently. Instead, she made gestures that told her story. The cursed armor had created flesh over her bones to stick to her, but the purification bracelet neutralized that. The other 2 treasures he gave helped recover her soul, and she returned to life. But after 100 years trapped in the dungeon as a skeleton, she lost the ability to speak. Haru understood he was responsible for everything and that Angelica followed him to repay this debt. He told her she was free to do what she wanted now, that she didn't need to stay with him always. She refused compassion and clung to him, unwilling to let go. Haru realized she needed someone by her side after so many years of solitude. So he stroked her head and told funny stories until she fell asleep. 10 days living under the same roof, and Angelica became more expressive around Haru. He asked her to fight with him because he wanted to test a new skill. She accepted, and he told her to attack him first. She obeyed, and he used phase to dodge all her strikes precisely. Then he tried to attack using the skill, but Angelica was faster and easily hit him on the head. She worried she hit too hard and killed the 2 brain cells he had left, but Haru told her not to worry. It was just training for him to become stronger than her. After training, he caught some things and told Angelica he'd prepare a delicious hot pot tonight. He also taught her how to cut fish properly, and she blushed from him being so close. After that, they had dinner, and Angelica was strangely shy the whole time. Suddenly, she grabbed Haru's hand, pulled him into the room, and made him sit on the bed. She came behind him, put her hand on his back, and he immediately understood it was just a massage. Nothing weird. She was happy he got it and started massaging him all over, but somehow she found all the wrong spots and left his joints feeling rusty. Haru stayed silent not to hurt her feelings, and Angelica still thought she hadn't done enough to show gratitude. He asked her to accompany him then, and they went outside to look at the stars. Haru stroked her head in thanks for her attention, and Angelica turned bright red. She moved away and tried to thank him nervously, but the words wouldn't come. She got embarrassed, and Haru comforted her, saying he understood she was trying hard. The next day, they went back to the city, and it started raining on the way. Haru held Angelica's hand as they ran. When they arrived, the rain stopped, but they still held hands, and the girls started teasing them. "Already like that?" The girls surrounded Angelica to find out what happened between her and Haru. Meanwhile, the guys surrounded Haru and called him a traitor for getting a girlfriend among the singles. He told everyone to go away, and then Angelica approached him. She tried to say something, but he asked her to relax and headed toward the dungeon. Suddenly, Angelica asked him to wait in a whisper so low it surprised Haru, who turned immediately. She thanked him in another shy whisper and went back to the girls' group. Seeing her like this, Haru realized that no matter how surrounded we are, in the end, everyone is a loner trying to make it in the world. That's why his conviction to stay alone for a long time grew even stronger, and he decided to continue on his own adventures. If you made it this far and want more deep dives into anime that actually respect your intelligence, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for Curious Nerd. We break down the smartest strategies, the craziest plots, and everything in between. Thanks for watching,